G'day mates, and welcome to another episode of, that's so bad, of Guild Wars 2 Daily. Welcome. I hope you guys had a lot of fun in the last beta weekend event, which is sadly now over. I hear the finale was incredible, but sadly I didn't actually get to play in the finale because I had work. Literally, I needed to leave for work just as the beta event was kind of ending, which totally sucked. So I missed out on it, but it did sound really, really good. I had a fantastic time in the beta. As you guys know, I put out some World vs. World videos already, and actually I've got some more videos as well that I'm hoping to have out soon enough of one of the mini dungeons in the game, the Font of Rand, which isn't really as small as its name might imply. It's a really, really cool dungeon, and I've got all of the footage on exactly how to get into the dungeon and what to do in there, and a bit of a guide, which should be really cool. So I got that too. My plan to get lots of PvP stuff. I played a hell of a lot of PvP, and I had so much fun in PvP, particularly towards the end. I kind of wish I'd played more PvP than I ended up doing so in the end, but I did realise pretty quickly that if I wanted to do commentary on the PvP stuff, it probably wouldn't be good if it was my own footage. So I'm thinking if I do end up doing something like that, it would probably be PvP footage that you guys are submitting in, which is totally fine. So many people have sent in PvP footage anyway. I am still looking if you've got any footage from the most recent beta, or you were once on my permissions list and I've used your footage now, but now you've got more. Please feel free to contact me in any way you can, and I'll be able to put it back up on Guild Wars 2 Daily. So that should be really cool. But yeah, it was a fantastic beta weekend event. I have a lot of impressions and stuff and ideas for things we can do on Guild Wars 2 Daily from here on out. I think we'll make a bit of a move away from the Q&A stuff going forward, but hey, we'll see what happens. For today though, I thought it might be fun, since we haven't done one for a while, to go into a lore spotlight about a topic that, honestly, I've been avoiding a little bit. I've been avoiding this because the lore, in my opinion, here is a bit of a mess. It's not very clearly defined, and it's a little bit confusing, even for me. So we'll go with it anyway. This is going to be a spotlight really on two different things, but they're a part of the same story. It's a spotlight on magic, what exactly is magic in the Guild Wars universe, and a character called King Doric, because they are kind of related. So what I'm hoping to do here as well is I'm hearing a lot of people saying that the spotlights I'm doing with the lore really aren't that useful for people who know nothing about the world and the universe. Well, I will just preface this by saying literally you don't need to know anything. All of this lore that I'm about to tell you is like really deep history kind of lore. It happened a long time ago in the world, and you don't really need any context about any of the other lore in the game, so hopefully it will make sense to you. Basically, this story, as much as it is a story, it is told many, many years, like over 1,000 years before the events of Guild Wars 1. And it talks about how the human gods, so the humans have got gods, the humans were brought to Tyria by these gods, and these gods have kind of always looked over humans, and the humans have worshipped them. Gods, these deities, they do exist, they're out there in the universe. The human gods at one point decided to give magic to the races of Tyria. Not just to humanity, but they gave magic to many races on Tyria. Exactly which races those were isn't clearly defined at all, because we will learn later in this spotlight about some races that seem to have magic before the gods even came into the picture. But they gave magic to the races of Tyria, essentially. So where do we start, really? That's probably a good place to start. First of all, we had a king. Way back then, there was a king of all three human nations. So on Tyria, you've got three human nations. You had Ascalon, you had Kryta, and you had Or, right? These three different places. The Guild Wars, the game's really named after when these three nations on this continent were always warring with each other. But many years ago, over 1,000 years ago, they were actually at peace for a while, and they had one single king, and this was King Doric. He was like the king of all men, basically. Dwayna, one of the goddesses, you can read some scriptures of her, and it will tell you a little bit of story about Dwayna, about that god. And the story that those scriptures tell are actually King Doric, this guy, coming to her and pleading she would help him end some wars. And she does that, and basically King Doric, with her help, ends the wars between humanity, right? And he becomes the king of all three nations. So that's really where the story starts. Dwayna, the god, helped. Dwayna, who, by the way, all this time ago, the gods were living on Tyria with humanity. They were living in Or, in the place called Ara. So King Doric went to Dwayna. She helped him end the wars, and he became king of all men. Now, back then there were 6 gods, and one of the gods, all this time ago, named Abaddon, decided that he liked some people that were kind of living in his area. He kind of lorded over this big ocean, this place called the Crystal Sea. And there were these seafaring humans that lived there, and they were called Marganites. And basically he decided at some point that he wanted to give them magic. So he gave, the first person he ever gave magic to was this character called Jadoth, and he gave this human magic, and he became like one of the first humans to have the magic of gods. And Abaddon seemed to like this idea, and he just ended up giving out more and more and more magic to everyone until eventually, and it seems like at the start at least, the other gods were also giving out magic too, to many, many humans all over the place, and other races too. So we had this situation where the gods were now giving out magic to all of the races. How much of that was just Abaddon giving out the magic, and how much of it was the other gods doing it as well, is unclear. But there was a point where the other gods decided, hey, we've given out enough magic, but Abaddon continued to want to give out more and more. And what it caused was chaos on the planet, on Tyria. It caused chaos. Everyone had way too much power, and they were warring, and there was massive bloodshed all over the place, and things just really got screwed up really, really badly, and it was absolute pandemonium. So this guy, King Doric, made a big long trek to Ara, where the gods were living, so that he could go and speak to them. He could go back to Dwayna and plead to her, and plead to the gods, please take this magic away. Look at what you've done to this planet. Please take the magic away. You need to get rid of it. And at this point, the gods seemed to listen to him, and they listened, and they said, yeah, you've got a good point here, we're going to get rid of the magic. Abaddon wasn't very happy with that idea, and this essentially caused a war between Abaddon and his followers, the Marganites, these people that were living on the Crystal Sea that he'd given magic to originally, and all the other gods. So there was this massive war where the 5 gods turned against this last one, this rogue one, this Abaddon, and they fought him and destroyed him and sealed him away in a place called the Realm of Torment. When that happened, the Crystal Sea, his kind of realm, dried up, and it became the Crystal Desert. And that's kind of a big other story that's kind of to do with Nightfall, but really that's the basics of what happened. He was defeated by these gods and sealed away. At this point, the gods kind of had a bit of free reign, and they decided, okay, we are going to take the magic away, and here's how we're going to do it. We're not going to get rid of magic completely. You can still have magic, but we're going to limit how much power you have over the magic that you've got. No one individual can have power over all different schools of magic. The gods had basically split magic up into 4 principal schools, okay? They had preservation, destruction, aggression, and denial. And each of these schools of magic essentially encompassed a large type of magic that someone could have. And the idea is you can't control preservation and destruction magic at once. You can only have one of them. You can't have denial and aggression. You can only have aggression or denial. So the way they split these schools up and made sure that this happened in this way was they created something called the Bloodstone, which was this massive thing that was split into 5 different sections. One section for each of these schools of magic, so preservation, destruction, aggression, and denial, and this final section called the Keystone, which was supposed to be this thing that forever sealed away all of the magic so they could never all come back together. And by doing this, by creating this Bloodstone, it meant that anyone that had gained magic from the gods were now limited. There's a small story there about how King Doric himself, actually, it's called the Bloodstone. The reason why it's called the Bloodstone is because Doric was the one that had pleaded to the gods in the first place to take the magic away, and in order to complete this ritual or whatever to create the Bloodstone, they actually needed his blood. Now, that doesn't mean he necessarily sacrificed himself and died on the Bloodstone to then complete the ritual, but he did give blood. He made a small sacrifice, as it were. There is some lore that seems to suggest he died far later on than this, but again, everything's quite hazy here at this point. But he sacrificed at least something, and he gave his blood to the Bloodstones to seal these things away. So then the gods had this massive, great thing. This Bloodstone is literally just this giant slab of material. It looks like rock or obsidian or something. And from this point, they threw it in the biggest volcano they could find that was kind of near to where they were, Ara, in the Fire Island chain. They threw it in there, and then they left the planet altogether. This war between them and Abaddon, and that, the drying up of the sea and all the chaos they'd caused, they decided that at this point they'd had enough of the planet, and they stepped back and they got away after sealing the magic away. They felt like they'd tampered enough. We obviously don't know the true motives of the gods 100%, but that's generally the impression you get. That's why they're left. And when they left in this way, this is called the Exodus of the Gods. The gods did continue from that point to watch over humanity. It's just they didn't live specifically there on the planet anymore, and rather than appearing in person to the races of Tyria, they would just send avatars down from that point on. This Exodus of the Gods is where we count dates from. So that was year 0, and then from then on it goes up. So in Guild Wars 1, the year is 1070. That's when it first starts, just before the searing. So that was 1070 years before the events of Guild Wars 1. And that's the story of the Exodus, which ties deeply into the whole magic story. So now from this point on, Doric went off, lived a very long life, over 100 years it seems in total he lived before dying, and then everyone that has ever been a king or a queen from this point in Tyria to have royal blood in the Guild Wars universe, they are descended directly from King Doric himself. Why they've kept that plot about magical blood from King Doric somehow being relevant is interesting. Maybe at some point we'll be able to use the blood of these people to break apart the Bloodstone again, or get rid of the seal that they've got over everyone's magic, which is an interesting idea. But the Bloodstone itself was only in the volcano for a short period of time. Shortly after the gods left, that volcano erupted, and these 5 sections of it that the gods had created all broke apart from one another. The keystone remained at the volcano, but all the other parts went flying out all over Tyria. Some of them went underground. They really went a very, very long way away, and we've only seen a couple of them in game. So they are now all over the world, and various races have found them, stumbled upon them, and begun to use them for their own purposes. So really that's all we've got on magic that the gods gave the races. As far as that's concerned, that's all we really know about the magic, that there's these 4 schools and it's supposed to be separated so no one individual can have access to more than one of these schools, otherwise it would cause chaos. But magic in the Guild Wars universe in total is more extensive than that, because the gods never actually created Tyria. They never created that planet. And in fact, when they came to the planet and started manipulating it and doing stuff with it, there were already races that existed on that planet, like the Jotun, the Massart, the Seers, the Dwarves. And these races all seem to have magic before the gods were even there. So they had an older, even more ancient form of magic that has nothing to do with the Bloodstones, is not restricted by the Bloodstones, and wasn't necessarily gained through the gods at all. They got it from somewhere else. So we get into a more interesting question now of, well, where did they get that magic? What else do we know was on Tyria before the gods? And then straight away you can look at the Elder Dragons. We have lore in the game universe that suggests the Elder Dragons radiate magic. The Asura started building Asura Gates. They built their central transfer chamber of Asura Gates by one of the Elder Dragons, and we've seen examples of this in different areas of the lore, that these Elder Dragons are emanating magic. So not just the gods have got magic, but the Elder Dragons have got magic too, and potentially unrestricted magic and dangerous magic. There's a difference there between what the gods gave the races and the races that already had magic around and were using magic. So it's a strange distinction, and some of the more powerful and older races in the Guild Wars universe could potentially have more dangerous magic, but we're not entirely sure. The Jotun, for example, I just mentioned, were one of these ancient races that were there before the gods, but they were also one of the races that flourished when the gods came and they gave them magic. You can speak to a Jotun in Holbrook in Guild Wars 2 who talks about his race getting magic from the gods, just like the humans did, and they flourished using that. So it's interesting. There is a lot going on with magic in the Guild Wars universe. We have other examples as well of people using magic before the gods gave it to people. For example, in the scriptures of the gods, you hear about specific incidences where the gods give individuals magic rather than all the races on a whole, and the magic they give people in those situations is slightly different. And also the ritualists as well. When Cantha came out, there was a lot of lore added about ritualists being able to use certain types of magic, like magic from their ancestors, long before the gods ever gave magic to all of the races. So then there's the question of where that came from too. The Norn as well are a pretty old race. We don't know how old, but if they end up to be really one of these ancient races, they've got their have runes and things that have got this uncanny ability to get into the mists. Did they get that from the human gods? Well, I doubt it. And if they didn't, where did they get that from? So magic is a fairly extensive subject, but it's also one with many, many holes. But this is the story of the Bloodstones and this guy, King Doric, who went on this big trek and pleaded for the gods to take magic away. And it ties into, as I say, a lot with that story of Abaddon. But that's basically it. That's everything we really know about magic at this point, and how much is going to be elaborated on in Guild Wars 2. We can't tell until obviously we get in game, but I'm hoping they'll go into a bit more about the Bloodstones and we'll learn more about exactly what they can be used for, because we saw the Massart, one of these ancient races, sacrificing people on the Bloodstones to charge these things called soul batteries, which they were then using to keep a portal to Abaddon's realm shut that just so happened to be right next to the keystone. So where the keystone was, where they threw the Bloodstone, it somehow created a portal that led to the place where the god that was originally giving magic out had been banished to. Is that a coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. And the Masat certainly realised that something was going on there, and they began to manipulate the Bloodstones in their own way to keep a gate shut over that portal, because they desperately didn't want Abaddon coming out at the keystone. Maybe that's why that portal's there, because Abaddon still wanted to give magic to all the worlds and create chaos, and he'd somehow opened a gateway between his realm, his prison realm, and the keystone, which is what he needed to do that. That's an interesting theory, which I quite like too. But there you go, guys. I'm not going to ramble much more. That's magic in the Guild Wars universe. Hope you learned something. As I say, we might go with more Q&A. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. If anything really grabs me, you know, we'll just take it easy and see how these videos go in the future. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to start talking about some of my opinions and impressions from the beta. Could be quite fun. Again, I hope you guys had a cool time in it, and I guess we'll have to wait another month till we can get back. But hey, the last one went pretty quick for me, so hopefully the next one will too. Yeah, thanks again, guys, and I guess I'll see you tomorrow.